Yo, Elliot. Got this question from one of our friends who wants to know how he should go about building the strength of his 3-month-old son. So he's a brand new father. He's already starting to think about how he can position himself and create an environment where his son will become the strongest version of himself. It begins by saying, Elliot, I've been watching your channel for some time. My first impression of you was wrong, he says. I thought you were just another overconfident tool who's spouting his own beliefs like a zealot. Well, it's kind of true. But then he goes on to say, well, thank you for all of the good things that you've shared with us through these videos, but now I want to take everything that I've gained through your support and give it to my son, because if my son were to traverse the path that I naturally did, he's going to be in big trouble. Our friend says when he was in high school, he had a really bad temper and he was overweight. And he says that, look, if my son is genetically inclined towards any of that, he's going to be fucked. So our friend is taking his time to develop his own strength, his own character, and wants to know, how can I begin to develop that in my young 3-month-old son who's going to carry on? You know, our children are our legacy in many ways, and he wants to know how he can make sure that he sets him up in the right way. Parenting is one of those issues that are just as touchy as all the other issues I talk about. Sex, God, politics, parenting. It's right up there, because as many different parents as you speak to, you're going to have as many different philosophies on how to raise your children. I am the father of 4 children. I am by no means done. I mean, my oldest is only 9 years old. But like yourself, I took great interest in how I should approach parenting from before my first child even got here. You know, I started reading books. I mean, if I could tell you one thing, no matter how many books you read, you're never prepared for parenting. And I read books and volumes of books. I mean, we had a whole library of books about parenting before the kid even got here, and I was ready. I tell you what, well, that shit goes out the window when you're posed with the challenge of actually parenting. But what I can offer you is a bit of perspective, some ideas that bring comfort to me, that I approach my parenting from, and perhaps could support you, because none of the advice I offer in these videos do I ever claim to be right and true and written in stone. They're just perspectives based mostly on my experience. And in my experience, and the story that I tell myself based out of it, our children are reflections of who we are. The very first thing that I like to do is, if there's something in my child that I don't like or that I want to see grow, I seek to develop it in myself. If my children have behaviors, they've adopted behaviors that I am not fond of, and trust me, they do, oftentimes do things that I'm like, what the fuck is going on with this kid? Right? I want you to be the strongest version of yourself, and you're acting like a fucking moron. And your son, Ezekiel is his name, yeah, he'll do that too, right? I'll come back to why that's important, but from the beginning, I want you to give you this sense of personal empowerment. Responsibility is one of those strange things where it's scary, so most people avoid it, and they do everything they can to tell stories to themselves and others about why they're not responsible for different areas of their life, or people in their lives, their children, you know, and so on and so forth. But I see responsibility not so much as a tool for blaming you for the results in your life, but more of an opportunity for empowering you to take charge of the things that you don't like in your life. So if you take responsibility for your children, and a lot of parents will argue this point, and they'll say, well, I can't take responsibility for my children because they're their own individuals. Yes, and I'll get back to that. But also, I like to take responsibility because then I actually have the power to make changes if I see fit. Now, not all those changes that I decide that I'm going to embark upon manipulating are actually going to come true, but I always move from a place of, I don't like this in my child, there must be something in me that needs to be addressed, because it's being reflected in my children. Or, I wish I was a bit more, you know, take any virtue you'd like. I wish I was a bit more generous. And if I want that reflected in my children, I had better go and develop that virtue myself. And if they're everything opposite of what I would have wanted them to be, I still have to look at myself and ask myself, how did I create this? It's a dangerous place to be, and one that a lot of people will argue with. Now, as with most of the things that I share with you in this video, it's not hard and fast. In fact, it's only about 50% of the story I tell myself. And it's a very delicate balance between what I just said about taking personal responsibility and your children being a perfect reflection of who you are, and the next piece of information that I'm going to offer you, the next perspective that I'm going to offer you. And that is, your child is an individual. And he will become what he's supposed to become regardless of what we think he should become. As parents, we often have expectations for our children. I mean, we have expectations for everyone and everything in our lives, and expectation is one of those forms of slavery that not only create bondage for you, because chances are you're not going to get what you expect from another individual, because human beings aren't that easy, but obviously it's a form of bondage for that individual, your child. You cannot imprison your child with your belief about what they should be. They're going to become what they want to become. You might decide that you want him, he's 3 months old and he's going to be because his mother's got big shoulders and I've got big legs, he's going to be a linebacker in the NFL. Yeah, but you know what? He might turn out to be homosexual and play the violin. What you going to do now? Because that's a reality. The reality is that your child might turn out to be everything opposite of what you wanted them to become, right? Now, is Elliott contradicting himself? No, I'm asking you to become sensitive to the dynamics of this situation. Take responsibility first for yourself and the way you approach the situations. Because if your son, who you decide is going to be a mixed martial artist, ends up being a pianist, right? Or something that's completely, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you now have to, a reflection of you will be, how do I deal with the child in this particular way? How do I now come home, because we always got to come home first, and approach the situation from a grounded place? Because that too is a test for you that's going to develop who you become, the strongest version of yourself, and the type of relationship you have with this person now that's going to go out into the world. See, our children at some point become completely individuated from you, hopefully at an appropriate time. They become individuated, and you have to respect them like another human being. And at some point, without the attitude of resignation and more one of respect and admiration, it is most resourceful to see that individual and appreciate them for who they become. Take responsibility, first for yourself. Also, move from a place of empowerment that says, if there's something that I see in my child, it's a sign that there's something in me that needs to be looked at. And finally, realize that when they individuate themselves, as all human beings do, work to cultivate the uniqueness that they have in them, even if you don't understand it. So of course, this is not necessarily a strength building or bodybuilding question, but one that was asked in this channel. And I think a lot of men who ultimately will have children will consider these things, especially if you're the athletic type and you're inclined towards athleticism, muscle building, strength, like you are and like I am. So that's it. Done.
Yo, Elliott,